Hello students, we are going to start our second 15-minute session with our material for today, January the 11th, Tuesday. And so here we have Albert Bierstadt's painting, and again, at this time in 1860 when he painted America, it looked very different than what it looks like today because of all of the progress that has been made with constructions of cities, and obviously buildings, infrastructure, highway systems. But here we have a view of the American West in its full beauty. So infinite spatial concepts allied with atmospheric perspective, which is the haziness in the background that you see here. Here's the horizon line where the sky touches the ground. We see the neutral tones, the lighter values, and then as objects get closer to the viewer, say here in the foreground, there's much more darker shadows, more detail. You can see things more clearly in the foreground. Basically, having imagery with deep space dominated Western art from the beginning of the Renaissance period in the 1600s to the middle of the 19th century, as we see here in 1860. And during this period, generations of artists, basically like Botticelli, Rembrandt, and Bierstadt, developed and perfected deep space illusion, and it was highly naturalistic. Now we're going to go ahead and take a look at some different spatial indicators. Here we have several spatial indicators that we will study, and these are different devices that you can use to create the illusion of space in your artwork. So number one, you can use sharp and diminishing detail. Some detail can be sharp and clear, some detail can be hazy and diminishing, depending on where it's at in the picture plane, whether it's in the foreground, the midground, or the background. So we don't have eyes like eagles. We view things through the Earth's atmosphere. So as a consequence, we are not able to see near and distant planes with equal clarity. Okay, our eyes just don't work that way at the same time. In the previous image, we saw haze in the sky in the background. In recent times, artists have used this phenomenon widely, and it's called atmospheric perspective. And we've talked about creating atmospheric perspective in artwork. Obviously, things, as they get further away, we see blurrier. Our eyes aren't designed to see far away objects in detail. Thus, in abstract and non-objective conceptions, sharp lines, clearly defined spaces and values, complex textures, and intense colors are associated with foreground imagery and near positions. So hazy lines, indistinct shapes, grade values, simple textures, neutralized colors like grays, tans, browns are identified with background locations. These characteristics, again, that is the definition of atmospheric perspective. Okay, so now we're going to look at number two. Another way to create the illusion of space in an artwork is with size. So depending on the largeness of scale of an object, that can be interpreted as something that's in the foreground. If you make something smaller in scale, that may be interpreted as an object in the background. So here we have a wonderful painting by Winslow Homer. It's called Returning Fishing Boats from 1883. It's watercolor and white gouache over graphite, which is pencil, on white paper. Watercolorists use white paper as their background because the white of the paper needs to be able to transfer through the layers of color, the transparent watercolor paint. And gouache basically is an opaque watercolor, okay? So something that's opaque is something you can't see through, like this cup. It is basically, I can put my hand through it. You can't see my fingers on the other side. It's opaque. Now, if I had a clear glass, you would be able to see my hands on the other side because you can see through something that's transparent like clear glass, but you cannot see something see something through something that's opaque, like this colored ceramic glaze on this cup. Now, in the image, we see a sailboat in the foreground with a lot of detail. There are people inside of it. The wind is hitting the sails. The boat is moving through the water, the rugged water. But in the background on the horizon line, we see some more sailboats, but they're very small in scale because they're much further away. So we don't see detail. We just see the masts of the sails. And then over in the far right, we see a steamboat. And again, we don't see much detail. It's so far away, okay? So size, making something large scale in the foreground, is going to be different than making something small scale in the background. So that's a way to create the illusion of space on a flat two-dimensional surface like a sheet of paper. This is a piece by Jacques Calais, and it's called The Great Fair at Interpenetration. This is an etching. Etching is a printmaking technique where you take a copper plate and you literally scrape it with a sharp device, a burn, and basically you etch an image into the metal, and then you roll ink over it, and then you're able to make prints of the image. In this print, note how the figures in the foreground are taller than the figures in the background, because as space gets further away in the background, the figures become so small you can't identify them. They're just little bitty marks, okay? Number 3 is position. So you can create the illusion of space by putting things in different places on the picture plane, okay? And the picture plane, again, is the space that you're working inside of for your artwork. So the horizon is at eye level. Here's the horizon line, and it provides a point of reference. Thus, the position of objects is judged in relation to that horizon line. So the bottom of the picture plane is seen as the closest visual point, and the rise up to the horizon line indicates the receding of space. So if we look at this box down here, basically it's a cube in space. We have the front of the box, which is a square shape, but then we see the back edges of the box and the top of the box. And as it goes back toward the horizon line, it's going back in space. So, sorry about that. This is the illusion of a three-dimensional box on a flat two-dimensional surface, okay? So the bottom of the picture plane is seen at the closest visual point, and the rise up to the horizon line indicates the receding of space, just like we saw in the sailboat painting. I can take an actual box, and if I put the box at eye level, you only see the front of the box. If I raise the box above eye level, you see the front of the box and the bottom of the box. If I drop the box below eye level, hopefully it's kind of hard to tell in this video, but you're going to see the front of the box and the top of the box, okay? If you were in class, that would have been a better illustration. Number 4, overlapping. You can overlap different objects in your artwork, and that's going to create the illusion of space in your artwork. So here we have an image of different swaths of felt layered on top of each other. So in the bottom right-hand corner, you see violet on top of blue, on top of yellow, on top of a darker blue. And again, the felt that's closest to you is the violet because it's on top of the others, okay? And again, so here I am in the video. If I put a cup in front of me, then the cup is overlapping and the cup is in front of me and it's closer to you in space, okay? Number 5, transparency. So usually when objects overlap, we cannot see behind an opaque object. So when I put the cup in front of me, I'm covering my face. You can't see my face, okay? Transparency is created when planes or objects are overlapped and you can see through them. The precise hard-edged shapes in this work are a legacy of Cubism. So here's a piece by Leonardo Neerman, and it's acrylic on masonite. So basically, if you look, let's look at this section right here where I'm circling with my cursor. We have kind of an aqua-colored rectangle, but then you see a curved, transparent film over it, and you can see part of the rectangle through it. And then there's also this triangular shaped form that's white that gradates into a transparent color. So this is an example of using transparency in artwork. Number 6 is interpenetration, and basically the passage of one plane or volume through another automatically gives depth to a picture. So interpenetration occurs when planes or objects pass through each other, emerging on the other side. So the spatial positioning of the planes and objects involved can create the illusion of either shallow or deep space. Well, this is an artwork by Al Held. It's called Quatrocentric number 13, and this was created in 1990. So we see some different forms. We see what looks like a box. We see the side edge, the bottom edge, and inside the box, because there's not a front or a back to the box. And we can see other similar forms behind it, floating in space. This is a very abstract piece. And we see almost like these linear ribbons that go through different objects and around different objects. And we do have a little bit of an illusion of deeper space in this painting, because there's kind of this little open glimpse area, this open hole area, where we see what almost could be interpreted as a hillside with some architectural structures on it. This almost looks like the top of a house. This looks like the side of a building, okay, the front side of a building. So a nice abstract piece with interpenetration being used. Here we have number 7, fractional representation. This is another way that you can create different illusions that give the viewer a feeling that space is in the artwork. Now, you can best understand fractional representation if you study Egyptian art. And the Egyptians were really interesting when they created their murals. They basically would show the human figure at its most identifiable angles. So if we look at this particular piece by this Egyptian muralist, this is in a tomb. And in this tomb painting, we see a pharaoh. That's the largest figure in the artwork. The Egyptians used something called hierarchical scaling. So the most important figure was always the biggest. Next to the pharaoh, we see his wife. And underneath the pharaoh, we see their daughter, who is the smallest of the 3 figures. They are on a boat, and they are in nature. You can see some fowls, some birds in the sky. You can see basically some reeds over to the left, and you see a view of fish underneath. Here's the line where the water is. You can see the fish in profile. And then there are hieroglyphics in the background. Now, it's kind of interesting the way they depicted the human figure. First of all, the head is in profile. But notice the eye is forward, okay? So the eye is forward, the shoulders are forward, the hips are turned, the legs are turned, okay? So you would almost have to break your body to be able to actually depict yourself in this viewpoint, all right? So this is called fractional representation. So it combines the most representative aspects of the different parts of the body, and it is a spatial device that was revived in the 19th century by Cezanne, who we just studied when we looked at Impressionist artists, who used its principle in his still life paintings. So that's pretty cool. Number 8 is converging planes. So converging parallels can make a shape appear to recede into the pictorial field. This concept abides with the rules of perspective, but many works of art have converging parallels that do not. So in this image, basically,